They shared a friendship and they even shared meat together. But little did one of them know that this friend of hers was also sharing her husband with her and would actually end up taking her life. This is the true crime story of Mary Wangui Kamangara, and it is an epitome of the African proverb that says that be careful of the people close to you, because it is they who have the opportunity to harm you the worst. Now, this true crime story is coming to you from Kenya in East Africa, and the details will wake you up to how dangerous and scheming some people can be when you are trying to just do them some good. And I think that it also touches on the fact that sometimes some men can open their wives up for a lot of danger due to their amorous relationships with the opposite sex. Now, the whole thing starts with a couple who have just started in marriage and are trying to find their feet. The man at the center of this is called Joseph Kori. Let's just call him Joseph. And his wife is called Mary Wangui Kamangara. Let's just call her Mary. Now, Joseph and Mary, like most typical African couples, started off their marriage not having much. They had to struggle financially to find their feet, and Mary was very supportive of Joseph. It is, however, documented as per testimony from Mary's sister later on in this story that Joseph actually had a wife or a woman that he was supposed to settle down with because he had been through so much with this woman, but then Joseph left this woman to take Mary. So in actual fact, it seems that Joseph betrayed that first woman just so he could be with Mary Kamangara, his now wife, as per this true crime story. So they opened that chapter of their marriage and started facing life as a couple. They didn't have much, but they were ready to hustle together. And so they did. And after some time, things started turning around. Their fortunes started improving because Joseph would end up setting up a hardware shop for his wife, Mary, and things were good with Mary as far as the business was concerned, and Joseph was also pursuing his own entrepreneurial enterprise and would also have his breakthrough sometime in 2018 when he had a contract from the government. So things were now looking up. All of a sudden, Joseph, the once meek young man who didn't have much, was now on the fly because his business was booming. Yeah. And this is where the problems would start. As it will turn out, his wife Mary had an employee helping her at the shop called Judy. Judy's full name is actually Judy Wangui Mungai, but let's just call her Judy. So just to recap, Joseph left a woman he was actually supposed to get married to, or is rumored to have been married to, just so he would marry Mary, and is now married to Mary, has set up a shop for Mary, and in that shop, Mary has an employee called Judy. I hope you are tracking. All right. Now Joseph has made it big and is on the fly. In African terms, he's deemed a big guy, and as is typical of some men, the moment he got the money, Joseph began to take on a lifestyle that depicted him thinking that because he's on the fly and he has the money, he needs to take on some new girls. And guess who his target was? None other than the employee of his wife by name Judy. So Joseph started dating Judy, although he was married to Mary, Judy's mistress at that shop, or let me say Judy's employer at that shop that he himself opened for his wife. And as a man, this is where personally I get disgusted, because I feel that when it comes to marriage, it's no longer about you thinking that because you're a man, you have the liberty to go and fool around with other women outside because you have a built-in excuse that that's how men are, as some people would say. I don't subscribe to that. I believe that as a man and as a husband, for that matter, one of the best ways to honor your wife is to stay faithful to her. It's vice versa. Same from the wife to the husband too. But Joseph obviously does not share in my philosophy, so that is what he resorted to doing. And this went on for some years, to the point that Judy actually resigned from that shop, because obviously if she's sharing her madam's husband with her, she would no longer have the humility to be an employee to that same madam. So she left the shop. But before she left, they had a cordial relationship, herself and Mary, whose husband Judy is cheating on her with. That is a love triangle, in case you haven't noticed. And that is what was playing out in the marriage between Joseph and Mary. Now, Mary had her suspicions. There are several videos of her praying and lamenting about these challenges in her marriage on social media. She knew, or at least she suspected to a very large extent, but she didn't have the evidence, and I can imagine how much that was eating her up. Of course, Joseph would also never admit it to Mary, and this was moving on for several years, up until sometime in 2019. And this is where the whole thing will come to a head, because as it will turn out, unfortunately, Joseph, in his cheating relationship with Judy, had now developed a dispute with her, to the point that Joseph at this point had tried to cut ties with Judy and had actually moved back to his wife's home. So Joseph was now trying to get back on track with his wife and their 6-year-old son. Someone would say that, yeah, that is honorable. Yeah, maybe. But I believe that the moment he stepped out of his marriage for another woman, he had actually opened the floodgates for issues to crop in. And they did. Because it turns out that Judy, the side chick, was also not ready to go. She was not ready to be dumped. Neither was she ready to let Joseph go. Because guess what? Judy also had nothing. She was dead broke, proud to meeting Joseph. But when she met Joseph, it turns out that Joseph turned her life around. He actually showered a lot of money on her, bought cars for her and stuff. Even moved her to a luxurious apartment and made sure she was always well taken care of. So obviously, being the side chick, possibly gold digger that she was, there is no way she was letting that payday go. So she was also trying severally to hold on to Joseph. Now, Joseph was now literally running away from his side chick, and she didn't hesitate in tracking him down. So, fast forward, on this fateful day, Mary was at home with her 6-year-old son when they heard a knock on their door. So her 6-year-old son went and opened the door and then shouted to his mom that it was Auntie Judy who was at the door. Now, his mom wanted to be sure who it was, so she decided to come and check. Now, when Mary got to the entrance of the door, she noticed it was Judy. Unknown to Mary, proud to her coming to check who it was, Judy, the side chick, had actually asked Mary's 6-year-old son, when he opened the door, of his father, with the intent of convincing this boy to let her know where his father was so she could go to him, because she was actually on the prowl for Joseph. And it turns out that she initially didn't even know where they stayed, but she had managed to track Joseph down to that house, and finally she was making her move. Now, when Mary came to see it was Judy, she seemed a bit surprised, but she didn't show it. So when she opened the door, she gave her a smile, they exchanged pleasantries, and then Judy said she had wanted to take her son out, but in the end, she offered to take Mary out on an all-girls outing. Bear in mind, these ladies have a friendship. They've worked together before. They have a very cordial relationship. So it wasn't out of the ordinary for Mary when Judy asked her out, as, hanging out, two girls hanging out, catching up on the past. All this time, Mary had her suspicions, but she didn't have evidence. So she obliged, and the two ladies agreed to go out that same afternoon, at which point Mary asked Judy to come in and take a seat whilst she tries to freshen up and put on something, so they step out together. But guess what? Judy refused. And I think I have an idea why she may have refused to come in. Because I think that knowing what she's doing with this particular woman's husband, she wouldn't want to come into the matrimonial home because the things she would see there will remind her of her position as far as the man and his marriage are concerned. And this is not something that is going to sit well with Judy, because already she's having a dispute with Joseph and is hunting him down, trying to reconcile and reconnect. So the last place she would want to be is to be inside the living room of his matrimonial home, seeing all the things about how bonded he is to his wife. So Judy refused and said she would just wait outside because she came with a waiting taxi, to which Mary obliged. Mary freshened up, put on something, joined Judy, and as they were about to go, the taxi developed a problem, to which Mary suggested they go together in her Mercedes-Benz. And Mary is also well-to-do in her business, and Joseph, her husband, is also taking very good care of her, so he also has a very flashy ride. So these two men hopped together into Mary's car and they drove off. They made a stop at a mall where Mary picked up a parcel, and then they went to a restaurant. Now, when they went to this restaurant, they had some fun, ate some food, and all this time they were taking selfies on Judy's phone and also on Mary's phone, to the point Mary was even sending some of these selfies to her husband, Joseph. The outing got so nice and cozy to the point that it seemed like their friendship was even being rekindled beyond expectation, to the point that these two men were sharing the same piece of meat together and taking selfies with it. Imagine you are at that restaurant with them and you see this. You would actually admire it. You might actually wish you had this type of friendship with some people in your life. But little did anybody think of how that day will end. And even to think to the extent that that day could end with one of them doing harm on the other person. But that was what was in store, and nobody actually knew. Because, as it will turn out, all this time around, Judy had not forgotten her mission. So, after the fun hours, Judy requested for a ride from a colleague of hers who runs a ride hiring service called Matengi. Now, he brought the ride. He brought it into the restaurant car park. Now, this restaurant is also very well secured and regulated. So they have CCTV cameras, they have passes for cars coming in and checking out. So when this car was brought in, they didn't take a pass. The driver did not take a pass because he didn't make it clear he was actually coming to wait around. So at the time that these women were done, they couldn't live in that vehicle. They had to live in Mary's Mercedes-Benz. And even that car could also not start. So then the excuse was that they are going to go, and then the man who brought the vehicle will come back and work on it and take the car back. Fast forward, Judy and Mary left the restaurant. And at this point, the twist began. Because I don't know if I should say as fate would have it. I don't think so. But unfortunately, Mary asked Judy to take her to her place. Now, her place here is referencing Mary asking Judy to take her to Judy's place. I was wondering why she would do that until I had a suspicion as to why she may have wanted to do that. Bear in mind, she already suspects that Judy is having an affair with her husband. So I think that the whole outing, her agreeing to go out with Judy, having fun, posing for pictures, I think all that was meant to wake Judy up, to let her guard down, let her in, and then trick her to take her to her place, so that once Mary gets to Judy's place, Mary might be in a position to get some concrete evidence of the fact that her husband is cheating on her with Judy. Now, Mary's request was granted by Judy, although I don't know if what I'm suspecting was Mary's true intent, but Judy granted her request, and they drove to Judy's house. Upon getting there, Judy let Mary into her apartment, and this was where the whole thing went south, because it turns out that Mary saw several pictures of her husband and Judy framed up and hung on the wall in the apartment belonging to Judy. And this started giving solid confirmation to Mary that her husband was the man of that house and that he was comfortably having an affair with Judy. It is reported that even the type of furniture in that apartment of Judy was the exact same furniture that Joseph had bought for their matrimonial home. So it was like he had replicated another matrimonial home for himself, and he was also spending quality time there with his side piece, Judy, and then coming back home to his wife, Mary. Now, per the research and reports, this did not sit well with Mary. So she then confronted Judy, and then a confrontation got heated because Judy was also not having it. Bear in mind, she is already having problems with Joseph. So the last thing she needs is Joseph's wife trying to get on her nerve. And the agitation then got physical to the point that it is suspected that Judy, in the physicality of the tensions issue, ended up inflicting a head wound on Mary with a pressure cooker. Mary fell unconscious, at which point Judy, realizing what was going on and the fact that there was no going back per where she has gotten to in the escalation, unalived Mary, wrapped her up, and then guess what she did? She called Matenge, the friend of hers whom she had hired a vehicle from. Now, Matenge went to this restaurant to pick his vehicle, which he couldn't leave with the first time. The guards refused to let him take it, but eventually he was able to take this vehicle, and then they drove off together with what was left of Mary. They put Mary in the boot of Mary's own Mercedes-Benz, and Judy drove that vehicle whilst Matenge followed in Judy's vehicle, which she had brought earlier. They took her to a dam and they dumped her in that dam. All this time, Joseph didn't know. He was at home now waiting for his wife. He'd sent her a message. she didn't respond, and he sent her another message that she should stay out and enjoy herself. She shouldn't come home. It would take a couple of hours before Joseph would now start reporting that his wife is either missing or kidnapped, because the time was odd for her still not to be at home. Eventually, Joseph would notice on Facebook that someone had been retrieved from the dam, and per the description and the outfit this person is reported to have been wearing at the time of retrieval, Joseph panicked because he figured it could be his wife. And when he took steps to confirm, his worst fear came true. So just like that, the outing had ended in the demise of Mary Kamangara. The police came in, they arrested Joseph and Judy because the first suspicion was whether they connived to do this. So both of them were arrested and investigations continued. Judy was eventually taken to her apartment, and it was at this point that police even saw several forms of evidence about what had happened in that apartment, because there were still traces of the scaffold there. There were some fluids from Mary that they saw, and straight away forensics determined what had played out in that apartment. Joseph agreed to testify against his side chick Judy, and investigations also extended to this restaurant where they confirmed their outing and everything, and even how they left and the vehicles they left in and all, because the CCTV had actually captured everything there. Unfortunately, however, this case is still pending in court, because just at the time the case was to fully resume and actually be dealt with in court, COVID set in and it had to be postponed. And as at today, in 2024 of me making this video, I haven't seen any updates on whether this case has now been called back to court. Now, when I did this research on this case, I got so sad, honestly, because you would realize that Mary was just a victim of what her husband was doing. And unfortunately for her, it turns out that the woman with which her husband was doing this was somebody who was capable of taking a life. And unfortunately, it turned out to be her life that was taken. But somebody also made a statement which I find very, very uncomfortable, if I should put it that way. But some would argue it's a statement that cannot also be debunked. According to that person, the person said that Mary got Joseph because Joseph actually dumped one woman to pick her, sort of cheated on that woman with Mary. So it was not going to be a surprise that Joseph did same to Mary with another woman, and that even in fact, if things had not occurred the way they played out eventually, and Joseph had settled with Judy, there's a high probability Joseph would have done that to Judy as well. Because once a womanizer and a cheat, always a womanizer and a cheat. I don't know, it sounds a bit insensitive, but some would argue there's a fact. Now, Joseph had charges against him dropped because investigations didn't find anything relating to him as a perpetrator or even an accessory. However, Judy and her colleague Matenge are now in the hot soup. Judy obviously has been found as the main culprit who took the life of Mary Kamangara, but then Matenge is also facing charges because he's an accessory after the fact, and he is trying to plead to the courts that he was forced. I don't know how Judy could have forced him unless she has something on him, or maybe she enticed him with something. But if she enticed him, then he was not forced. So I'm waiting to see how this case will be called back to court and how it will play out. I just hope it's not going to be held out for long, because I think that Mary and her family deserve the justice that the legal system should give them. It's very unfortunate. But if you are watching this and you're a married man or a married woman, I'll plead with you. Please respect the vows of your marriage. You know, at the funeral of Mary Kamangara, Joseph was there reading a tribute to his wife, talking about how much he loved her. And I got a bit angry. And you know, what he was saying to me, I felt that, or I believe that if he meant it, he wouldn't have to read it. He should just speak from his heart, and all those things and many much more beautiful and romantic things would have come out. But you see in this video, he was reading it out as though he was reading a memo. And I think that was his guilt showing on his face, because he sort of brought this upon her. That is what I think. It's very unfortunate. If you're a married person, please respect your vows. And this 6-year-old boy will now have to go through life without his mom. He wrote a nice tribute for his mom with a crayon. And that is very touching. That is very touching. I don't know how it will play out when he grows up and he can fully appreciate the details of how he lost his mom and the part his father played in it indirectly. That could be something else. I hope that the family of Mary find the healing that they need, and they and Mary herself get the justice that they deserve. What do you think about this case? What do you think about the fact that some women are so bent on lurking around people's marriages and ensuring that they are also established side chicks, creating problems for the marriage and the family within that marriage? Let's have a conversation on this. If you have similar things you know, let's share it in the comment section. Until then, stay safe out there, keep an eye out. I'll catch you on the next one.